Victorian London was awash with ridiculous legends, terrifying scientific advances, and a fascinated but cruel attitude to real-life disability and tragedy. When I was writing my book, The Inevitable Jack the Ripper, I thought it was important to put the case into this historical context to understand the mindset of the Ripper, his victims, and society at large. This video will look at some of the stranger episodes from this period, and the content is taken in part from the book, which is available on Amazon, link in the description. Anyway, now that the plug is out of the way, let's delve into the heady, dirty and downright bizarre world of the Ripper's London, where fiends seemingly lurked around every corner. An example of the rampant credulity and search for monsters in London and beyond before the 20th century was the bizarre belief in pig-faced women. Stories of hideous porcine ladies, half woman, half hog, emerged at around the same time in England, the Netherlands and France in the few centuries prior to the Ripper spree. Starting in the 1630s right up to the late 19th century, the tales exposed a belief in witchcraft or divine punishment depending on the story. Some said pig-faced offspring were the result of a curse on pregnant women who had snubbed a beggar. Another tapped into the pet prejudice of the day by claiming a pig-faced girl was the result of her father converting to Judaism. James Paris Duplessis, a former servant of the famous diarist Samuel Pepys, covered the phenomenon in his Short History of Human Prodigious and Monstrous Births, compiled 1731-33. In his A Woman with a Hog's Face, he wrote, "This monster was a gentlewoman of a good family and fortune, very tall and well proportioned, of a very fine fair white skin, black hair on her head and eyebrows, but her face perfectly shaped like that of a hog or sow, except that it was not hairy. When she went abroad she covered her face with a large black velvet mask. She had a grunting noise like that of a hog, very disagreeable, but spoke very distinctly. She lived in St Andrew's Parish, Holborn, London." Charles Dickens also addressed the issue in 1861, revealing a deep understanding of the human condition and its propensity for belief against evidence. He said, "In every age, I suppose, there has been a pig-faced lady." Another legend, and one of particular infamy, was the pig-faced lady of Manchester Square in 1814-15. It was claimed that she would occasionally venture out of the house in a carriage, hidden by a heavy veil. Several letters to London newspapers reported sightings of a snout protruding from a window or a veiled, silhouetted pig's head in a passing carriage. She was even spotted by revellers celebrating victory over Napoleonic France in Piccadilly. It was thought some of these cases were hoaxes, where shaved bears were dressed up in women's clothing and exhibited in fairs. The belief in deformed part-animal monsters gained credence in the tragic case of Ripper contemporary, the so-called Elephant Man, Joseph Merrick, 1862-1890. Even learned men of the age were astounded by Merrick, who experienced harsh treatment as an exhibit in a freak show and spending 4 years in a workhouse before finding a modicum of dignity at the Royal London Hospital later in his life. Merrick's existence fed a desire for supernatural monsters and entities, which coincided with advances in nature threatening the Christian order. The grasping regression for answers to the meaning of life did not just afflict the less educated classes either. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of evidence-based detective stories featuring Sherlock Holmes, was a firm believer in fairies, and his father, Charles Altamont Doyle, was a leading fairy painter. 2 generations of leading Victorians thereby buying wholesale into the belief in the other side. By 1888, the year of the Ripper murders, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, released 70 years earlier, would already be lodged in the national consciousness. The book's full title was Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, a salutary if on-the-nose lesson against playing God, certainly, but also the introduction of the notion of the mad scientist or the mad doctor. Fear or wariness of scientific discovery could conceivably be an expected response, especially when you look back on the actions and discoveries of some in the scientific fraternity in the 1800s. In 1836, Andrew Cross MP, a member of the Electrical Society of London, thought he had created a new insectoid life form when he observed electrolysis in his laboratory. He thought he was seeing legs growing as the various elements of a piece of volcanic rock separated into crystals. He wrote, "Each figure assumed the form of a perfect insect, standing erect on a few bristles which formed its tail." He added, "It was not until the 28th day, when I plainly perceived these little creatures move their legs, that I felt any surprise, and I must own that when I saw this took place, I was not a little astonished." In the run-up to the 19th century, experiments with electricity gathered pace and, in 1780, Italian scientist Luigi Galvani, a professor of anatomy at Bologna, began a series of experiments on illuminating the nervous system of dead and dissected frogs. Andy Dugan wrote about these experiments in his book Raising the Dead, The Men Who Created Frankenstein. He described a moment when a student saw something astounding. It happened by chance that one of my assistants touched the inner crural nerve of the frog with the point of a scalpel, whereupon at once the muscles of the limbs were violently convulsed. Another of those who used to help me in electrical experiments thought he had noticed that, at this instant, a spark was drawn from the conductor of the machine. I myself was at the time occupied with a totally different matter, but when he drew my attention to this, I greatly desired to try it for myself and discover its hidden principle. So I too touched one or other of the crural nerves with the point of a scalpel, at the same time that one of those present drew a spark, and the same phenomenon was repeated exactly as before. The marvel of electricity had, just a year earlier, been viewed as something of a panacea. In Royal Terrace, Adelphi, Dr. James Graham opened his Temple of Health, where he drew on his research into the work of Benjamin Franklin. Graham believed in the power of electrical current to cure most ills, and sought to profit from spreading that belief. To say that Graham was a charlatan would not be inaccurate. His Temple of Health claimed satisfaction in the bedroom could be had through electrical stimulation and could be bought for half a crown. He hired scantily clad women to sell his magnificent electrical apparatus to gawking and credulous crowds. He even invented a celestial bed which he claimed could cure impotence. The fear and suspicion of the learned and of science itself was exacerbated as the breathtaking pace of scientific and industrial revolution transformed an entire way of life, especially for the working poor. Cities grew exponentially, like Shelley's fictitious uncontrollable monster devouring all before them. If Frankenstein was already a veritable classic, Robert Louis Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde was brand new and all the rage. Released in 1886, the novella was an instant hit and again underscored the danger posed by departing from religion and dabbling with science. The grotesque Mr. Hyde is perhaps a fitting creation for the era, as the Ripper would have had to bottle up his Hyde side and masquerade as a kinder, more respectable character like Dr. Jekyll to avoid detection. Perhaps this early study of split personality, or dissociative identity disorder as it is now called, explains the actions of the infamous Whitechapel attacker. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and most importantly subscribe. And you can also support the channel on Subscribestar via the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.